here today to do the wrap-up rankings video for round 3 of the BookTube prize. So I have said in my vlogs about this round, which are all linked below, by the way. If you're interested in hearing really detailed thoughts about the books, please check those out. That this was the most challenging round for me thus far this year. I have done all the rounds, and round 3 just kind of kicked my butt and made me feel rather overwhelmed at times. And I think it was just a product of many other life things that made that so, but I was certainly really relieved when I finished the final book with quite a bit of time, a few days left to submit my rankings, which I just did. So I'm going to talk to you about my rankings, and as I did previously, I'm going to talk about the books in order from the one I liked the least to the one I liked the most. So in the number 6 position is Say Nothing, A True Story of Murder and Memory in Northern Ireland by Patrick Radden Keefe. And this was the last book that I read, and I really struggled with this content. This book is supposed to be a narrative nonfiction, not historically, so not a historical basis, but a narrative nonfiction, and it focuses on 4 people during the Troubles: Jerry Adams, Brendan Hughes, Dolores Price, and Jean McConville. And what I struggled with this one is just the sheer amount of violence in it, and a kind of lack of context given, and a kind of lack of an overall thesis behind the writing. So for me, if you're going to write a book about something that is so heavy and full of, violence, then you need to have a reason for the depth of violence that you are sharing with the reader. And I don't feel that Keefe had a clear reason. It feels like this was written to be entertainment, and it feels like it was written to like an action movie, from pivotal scene to pivotal scene, detailing aspects of the violence that you don't need to know. It doesn't help you put anything more into context other than the kind of devastation of a lot of these people's lives. And so for me, while it was well written and well researched, I just felt like the overall point of this book was lost on me. And that's why I put it in the number 6 position. In number 5, I put Underland by Robert MacFarlane. And if you would have asked me at the beginning of this round if I was going to be putting Underland in number 5, I would have thought that that would have been ludicrous, because I love nature writing, and I'd heard a lot of people rave about this book, people whose opinions that I usually agree with. And so I was quite surprised when it didn't blow me away. The reason it got number 5 and not number 6 was because there were a few sections of the book that I really enjoyed reading. So for instance, the Paris catacombs, and at the very beginning there was a section on caving in a part of England that I found very interesting. I still found little snippets here and there throughout the rest of the book that were, insightful or interesting. But overall, again, I didn't really understand, MacFarlane's overall theme that he was trying to convey. He ended up putting a lot of things together in sections that I didn't feel went together very well. And it was very heavy on the science, which for me is just not an area that holds my interest very well. So while I can be engaged by science writing, I'm not going to be able to sustain pages and pages of it. And in this case, I actually listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook was, the narrator was great, and it was engaging in the points where I was engaged, but I didn't find it engaged me enough to be, anything more than number 5. So the top 4 books for me present a bit more of a challenge in terms of ranking, and I hemmed and hawed a little bit about where number 4 and number 3 were going to be, because obviously when you're doing the rankings, number 4 is the one that you want to be taken out, and number 3 is the one that you think should go on ahead. And so it was very much a struggle to figure out which one was going to be the best one to put in which slot. But in the end, number 4 for me was Solitary by Albert Woodfox. And the subtitle of this one is Unbroken by 4 Decades in Solitary Confinement, My Story of Transformation and Hope. So this book very much is a story of transformation and hope. It is Albert Woodfox's own words telling his very heart-wrenching experience of being held in solitary confinement for decades for basically his political beliefs and the color of his skin. He was framed for a prison crime that he did not commit, and the system conspired to maintain his isolation and his mistreatment for decades. And so this book is so important. If you are looking for an example of systemic racism, this book is a perfect book for you to read. It really will help you understand how the system works to oppress Black people. Albert Woodfox grew up in New Orleans, and he was in the prison system for decades, and he was a prison system activist. He educated himself, he learned the system, he also followed the philosophy of the Black Panther Party, and that really empowered him and gave him the ability to connect with 2 other men, and their friendship and solidarity was something that pulled him through. And so I found that very enriching and enlightening. I really did think that this book had so many important messages and very important information for people, especially during this time. The reason it didn't get higher than number 4 was that there is a lot of detail of the trials that Albert Woodfox had to go through when he was appealing the wrongful conviction. And I really struggle with reading about wrongful conviction, whether it's in nonfiction or fiction. I get very frustrated and emotionally involved. For me, there was just a bit too much detail in this book. And that was because Albert Woodfox wanted to very clearly point out where the system had erred him in terms of the people who were testifying against him, who were paid and received incentives to do that, and he needed to refute them all. And for me, I understood from the beginning, as he said, that they were lying, and so to read their testimony was very, very frustrating as a process, because you know already that they're lying, and so to hear what they're saying is just increasing your aggravation. And I know that's nothing compared to the aggravation that Albert Woodfox endured, but I just felt as a book, as a story, it bogged the story down a bit for me. But this is a super important book. I am so glad that I read it, and I would recommend it if anyone is really not able to grasp the extent of systemic racism. I think this book is going to really help you understand just how entrenched racism is in the prison system and in the justice system in general. So for number 3, I put in Sea People, The Puzzle of Polynesia by Christina Thompson. This book flows really well. It is well researched. I really liked the way Christina Thompson told this story, and the most important emphasis for me is the emphasis that she put on conveying the inherent intelligence in the Polynesian peoples who populated the Polynesian Triangle. So from New Zealand to Hawaii to Tahiti, whichever island is down at the bottom. That was one thing that I felt was lacking. There isn't really... Oh, Easter Island, Hawaii, and New Zealand is the Polynesian Triangle here. And so you've got this map in the front, but you don't really have any other maps in this book, which I thought would have been helpful, but I just looked it up on my phone. I think overall, this book does a great job at showing you the way colonialism inflicted its viewpoints upon the Polynesian people, and then the way colonization told the story of the Polynesian people until the Polynesian people were able to get their own agency and work that system towards a more equitable story. So I really, really enjoyed that, because ultimately the question of how these islands were populated could not be answered by a Western mentality, but instead had to be explored through the inherent knowledge of the Polynesians themselves, and that is how they came to the determination. And I really thought that that was a wonderful conclusion, very uplifting. It's a part of the world's colonization that I didn't know very much about, so that was really, really enlightening for me. And I think it's just a really well put together book. It has a clear direction, it has a clear message, what it's trying to tell you. It's trying to tell you the story of how Europeans encountered Polynesia, the way they came up with their theories, and the way they developed an idea, how those ideas were then disproven, or how they were misconstrued, or how they were used for terrible means, and then how the Polynesian people themselves were able to come to a place of understanding for themselves and connect back with their roots and take over the colonization aspects of the Western European mindset and tell their own story, essentially, which is always what is important. And just in case you're wondering, Christina Thompson is not herself Polynesian. She's married to a Maori man from New Zealand and has 2 sons with that man. And so she traveled to the islands, and she did her research and was part of the culture through marriage. And so that's how she told the story. And she put herself in here a tiny bit, but really she focuses on the topic. And I thought she did a great job telling the story. My number 2 book was Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, and I listened to this on audio, and Ronan Farrow himself narrates it. So in case you don't know what this book is about, it is about the journalistic journey that Ronan Farrow took, beginning with his work at NBC, to uncover the Harvey Weinstein abuse. And he was not doing this alone. There were other journalists working at the same time. There were other journalists who worked before him. He did a really good job of including all of them and making you understand how complex the system was that allowed Harvey Weinstein to maintain his abusive behavior over decades. And Ronan Farrow also included his own story, so what was going on in his life as he was interacting with his sister, because they are a very famous family who have already dealt with accusations of sexual abuse, and so he related that in the story. He related his relationships with with the victims of Harvey Weinstein, and how difficult and tumultuous the relationship was. He relayed his relationship with other employees at NBC and at the New Yorker, and I thought he did it all in a highly entertaining manner. I mean, the subject matter of this book is very, very difficult to read. The things that Harvey Weinstein did were terrible, And I thought that he conveyed so much compassion for all the women who came forward, and he really amplified their voices, and he always wanted to keep the focus on amplifying their voices, and I really respected that for him. I think his audio narration was at times kind of amusing because he tried to do accents, which didn't always work that well, but I think overall I really enjoyed listening to the story in his own voice, and I think the book was just so well crafted and put together. He didn't go off on tangents, he didn't lose the story anywhere. The story was really cohesive and really well presented, and that's why I got my number 2 spot. So number 1 for me was The Yellow House by Sarah M. Broom. This is a memoir, and I just really connected with this book. It's interesting that this is the only book in this grouping that was a memoir, and I do favor memoirs. I think I just really connected with Sarah M. Broom on an emotional level. We're a similar age, and I just felt that her outlook on the world was so similar to mine, despite the fact that we live in such different places and grew up under completely different circumstances. We just had a similar outlook on life, which really made me connect to the book. I also found her relaying of the story through the house as the central point to be such a unique perspective, and I really enjoyed every part of how she put the story together. She also tells the history of New Orleans East, which is the area that she grew up in, which I found fascinating. I love the parts where she travels away from New Orleans and goes out on her own and really comes into who she is as a person. And I totally related to that as well, because I also live far away from my family and from my childhood home, and so I totally understood why she needed to go away, but also how connected she was to the place and the people there. Her love, her family's love is a really wonderful and strong component that goes through the whole book. I found it interesting when she worked for the city of New Orleans post Hurricane Katrina and told the first-hand accounts of her family who were in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. I couldn't believe how long it took for her mother to receive her payout for her home after Hurricane Katrina. I believe it was 7 years before she actually got, payment and some restitution for losing her home. I just thought that as a book that offered a unique perspective, that talks about not just the Black experience through violence or through racism, but also through living and breathing and hope and tears and just the story of her family. I really thought it was a wonderful book, and I would really encourage anyone to read it. I think it's got something really unique and fresh. She's just a wonderful writer, and she's a natural storyteller, and I really enjoyed learning about her family, and I think that she did an excellent job. So those are my rankings for the semifinals of the BookTube prize. I am quite curious to see what books get through. I will not be judging nonfiction for the final round. I will be judging fiction. So it will be interesting to see what final 6 books are in the finals. And I'm a little, as usual, I'm a little bit worried that my opinions might have differed quite a bit from the other judges in my group, and that some of my favorites might not make it through, but this is definitely a feeling that I've gotten used to after 3 rounds of the BookTube prize. So thank you so much for watching, and I will be vlogging and doing a final video for the last round coming up at the end of September. And I do encourage you to go check out the BookTube Prize channel. Robert always makes playlists that include all of the videos made by judges on BookTube so that you can see other perspectives on these books if you don't like my opinions on them. So thanks so much for watching, and I will be back again soon with another video.